Now hear this. Howdy folks, and welcome to another battle breakdown. Today we're back in the Sigma Draconis Space Engineers server, documenting the back and forth night raids over Ariel on the night of December 8th to the morning of the 9th. Before I begin, I've got a message for the viewers. Thank you for the great reception of my first video I posted a couple weeks ago. It means a lot to see that much support for a new project. Also, thank you to all the people who made suggestions on how I can improve my videos. I've took a ton of suggestions into practice. For instance, among other things, I have a new microphone that'll record my voice better. I'm editing in DaVinci Resolve instead of Filmora. I've changed how ships are displayed, colors-wise, and I have effects for drives, shots, torpedoes, and more. Finally, thank you to the people who attended the fight that helped me build an account of what happened. This isn't a TV show, so everything happens naturally. Without input from people who fly with me and the people who are technically my enemies, I couldn't make this happen. Thank you. Remember to like and subscribe, and enjoy the video. This fight was one of the many fights to control the King of the Hill point on Ariel. What made this fight special was the time that it happened. Ariel became available for capture only a few minutes past midnight. Despite the horrible time for fighting, decently sized forces from all three nations showed up to contest the capture. First, let's go over the objectives of each nation. Mars and Earth both have something to gain by winning. Both nations are eligible to capture Ariel and gain control over the Soul Gate. Needless to say, this is the prime objective for both MCR and UNN. Similarly, both nations have the same secondary goal, to get kills. It's often easier to get an enemy to run than kill them. If either nation can score several ship kills, the cost of the enemy may outweigh the Soul Gate's benefits themselves. Then there's the OPA. The OPA had previously held Ariel and therefore was unable to capture it again. Usually the nation in this situation doesn't bother defending. While they still hold a radar around Ariel while the capture is going on, there's very little they have to gain for fighting over it. In this case, however, the next capture is set to happen just prior to peak hours for OPA. Here, OPA's primary objective is to delay the capture for 4 hours to aid later operations. Now, here are our forces at the outset of operations. At roughly midnight, the UN and OPA each assemble a small force, both of which begin to coalesce into formations. The UN formation consists of one cruiser, 2 guided torpedo destroyers, or DDGs, and 1 brawler. The OPA formation consists of 1 cruiser, 1 DDG, and 3 brawlers. While the UN fleet is smaller, their stronger showing of firepower puts them at a clear advantage. The UN fleet is first to finish its coordination, and uses the time afforded to it to claim position on the point. OPA forces finish their coordination 10 minutes later. With their fleet in position, OPA begins the assault, lighting their drives and giving away their position. The UN fleet moves to intercept, and less than 2 minutes later, the two fleets collide. First, 2 OPA ships, both JSO brawling ships, dive into the UN formation, attempting to achieve a quick kill and disorient the enemy, if at the cost of the 2 ships. UN vessels react quickly, and the target ship manages to keep just at a PDC range while the surrounding UN vessels level enough railgun and torpedo fire to rend the OPA ships into pieces. The rest of the OPA fleet then takes up a more defensive stature, leading out the UN vessels. With momentum on their side, OPA ships fire torpedoes into the oncoming ships, scoring 1 easy kill against the UN's brawler, vaporizing the ship. Now left against a smaller force, the OPA cruiser, an FCN ship, moves to brawl with the UN fleet. Still being outnumbered, the cruiser doesn't last long in the face of oncoming fire. However, they do score several hits, inflicting moderate damage upon the UN cruiser and one of their DDGs. With their sacrifice having provided an opening, the OPA DDG breaks through the defense of the UN cruiser and scores a clean salvo. While the damage is not great enough to vaporize the ship, it is enough to leave it combat killed and under minimal thrust. At this point, the bulk of remaining ships are DDGs. With their torpedo stockpiles depleted, these ships aren't able to bring serious firepower on their targets. Several ships, responding for calls for reinforcement, are now inbound. The reinforcements' drive signatures betray their numbers, and the ships still engaged can clearly see that more OPA reinforcements will arrive sooner than UN reinforcements. The remaining UN DDGs make the call to quit the field and rearm before they are trapped without proper defenses. OPA forces are left with control of the point and use this time to rearm and replace their ships with fresh reinforcements. In this downtime, the Martian ships begin to join the contest. A small MCRN fleet, roughly in equal numbers to the OPA fleet, enters the AO. Unfortunately for them, while coordinating, they run into a lone UN ship on the way to join their fleet. While this could provide a good opportunity, the UN ship reacts quickly and invades interception. The result is that the Martian fleet gives away its position and pauses its coordination for no particular gain. This buys UN more time to gather reinforcements. Not too long after, the UN has garnered a force of 4 cruisers and 3 DDGs. With more than ample reinforcements, the newly assembled UN fleet makes a push for Ariel. The OPA fleet has once again moved slower than the UN at coordinating. While the original 3 brawlers and 1 DDG are still at Ariel from when they took the moon, all incoming OPA reinforcements are too far out and can only catch the back end of the engagement. As the time to contact closes, the OPA fleet decides to pull away and regroup. This decision is made late, and the ships of the fleet only begin to move when the distance is close to visual range. The result is a stern chase with both sides attempting to get in a lucky shot. While both fleets briefly enter maximum targeting range for railguns, the hail of torpedoes prevents ships from either side from keeping that range. OPA ships continue to flee until the UN fleet can no longer feasibly catch up. At this point, the UN fleet returns to capturing Ariel, while the OPA fleet pulls away for regrouping and field repairs. During the time of the second UN-OPA engagement, MCRN ships begin a slow approach towards the UN at Ariel. As they approach, they once again happen upon bad luck. In the same manner as before, the Martian fleet stumbles into a UN cruiser that had arrived late. Once again, the Martian fleet gives chase, and once again, the UN ship slips away. This time to Ariel and the rest of the UN fleet. At this point, the Martians are close to the moon themselves, and instead of taking an extended time to reposition, decide to attack now. The Martian fleet, consisting of 5 ships, 1 DDG, 2 cruisers, and 2 brawlers, smashes headlong into the much larger UN formation, now consisting of 5 cruisers and 3 DDGs. The fight is brief but fierce. Being thoroughly outnumbered, the MCRN fleet hopes to delay the capture and get some kills, weakening the UN formation. However, short of a sound strategy or some divine intervention to upend such uneven odds, the Martian fleet underperforms. First to go is a LAC cruiser, followed by 2 lighter brawlers. Finally, having only achieved light damage and with no further prospects, the remaining 2 MCRN ships quit the field. Halfway through the MCRN-UNN engagement, the regrouped OPA ships attempt to make their third pass. However, they leave late and cannot reach the battle before the Martians are defeated. As a result, this only succeeds in giving away the OPA position far in advance. Once again, in what is becoming a theme for this fight, the OPA has taken too long. The OPA fleet, consisting of 2 DDGs, 1 cruiser, and 3 brawlers, plus a second cruiser that arrives late, dives headlong into a fully prepared UN fleet. In near-perfect mimicry of the first engagement, 2 OPA ships, both JSO brawlers, attempt to get a lucky kill in at the cost of their ships. While these vessels don't dive into the middle of the enemy formation as they'd had previously, the UN fleet, now nearly twice its starting size, has the firepower to make up the difference and vaporizes them instantly. The UN fleet moves to chase the remaining OPA vessels. This once again results in a prolonged stern chase. OPA vessels fire backwards into the oncoming UN ships, scoring occasional hits. One OPA ship, a brawler, somewhat separated from the rest of the fleet, meets a similar fate to the JSO brawlers. A few UN vessels peel off into range, disable its drives, and the UN fleet sends consecutive torpedo volleys until it is vaporized. Another OPA ship, this time an FCN cruiser, tries to break off to deal some damage, but also suffers the same fate. However, this time, the heavily armed cruiser manages to moderately damage 2 ships as it goes down. The OPA DDGs manage to use this opening and score several torpedo hits. While it isn't enough damage to destroy the ships, 2 UN vessels take heavy enough damage to be combat killed. Not that it matters though. With only 2 ships left in formation, successive UN torpedo volleys overwhelm the PDCs on the OPA DDGs. One is vaporized instantly, while the last has its drive section rent from the hull and is left drifting on maneuvering thrust. The final OPA ship quits the field. At this point, we're approaching 3.5 hours of constant fleet maneuvers and fighting, which, mind you, started at midnight. Crews across all partaking nations are exhausted. Many OPA players who have lost ships go to sleep for the night. Similarly, the large majority of UN vessels are forced to leave so their pilots may sleep, so they may rearm, or so they may repair. This does not mean that all players have gone to sleep, however. 4 OPA pilots have crewed new ships, while 2 UN vessels have stayed behind to finish the nearly complete capture for the UN. As the 2 UN vessels, 1 cruiser and 1 light cruiser, make their way back to the point, 2 OPA cruisers approach from separate vectors. One, a JSO cruiser, burns in loudly, while the other, an FCN cruiser, drifts in silently. Upon reaching the point, the JSO cruiser grabs the attention of the UN ships and leads them into the second OPA cruiser. Unfortunately, due to a piloting error, the second OPA cruiser gives away its position and the UN ships turn to run. What follows is a bizarre 20-minute chase as a single OPA cruiser chases the 2 UN cruisers while dumping all of its ordnance to no effect. The FCN cruiser, assuming that the UN vessels would continue to run and that they therefore would be unable to help, stay behind. Eventually, after the JSO ship expends all its torpedoes, the 2 UN ships finally flip. After a few seconds of brawling, the fight flips Looney Tunes style, with the OPA ship now being chased. Once again, this continues for some time. Eventually, the other 2 OPA ships, both DDGs, finally reach the fight and, upon lighting their drives, cause the UN ships to turn and flee. However, before they can quit the field, the OPA cruiser manages one raking volley on the drives of one of the UN ships. Unable to keep speed, the light cruiser fights back while the other UN cruiser is forced to leave them behind or be caught as well. The ship fights back, but under incoming fire from 4 angles is destroyed, leaving one final kill for the Belters. With the bulk of the UN fleet having left, and the last UN ship and sector having gone into hiding, the remaining OPA ships leave the AO. With this final engagement, the timer has hit 4 hours, and the next aerial capture has been sufficiently delayed. 30 minutes after the OPA forces leave, the remaining UN cruiser moves in on Ariel and takes the capture with no resistance. This fight was complex. The constant back and forth positioning made it hard to keep track of, let alone display. Value on this server is often measured in fun for time. Sometimes people won't want to sacrifice their ships because replacing them could take more time than their goal is worth. On the other hand, sometimes people are more interested in getting into a fight and having fun than any objective, and are therefore happy to lose ships if there's a good scrap. In this fight, a mix of these mentalities led to a combination of back and forth chases and headlong charges. Here is the final tally. MCR lost 3 ships while 2 got away. They achieved neither their first nor second objective, though I'm sure they were more interested in the fighting itself than anything else. OPA lost 9 ships while 6 survived. OPA did achieve its primary goal of delaying for 4 hours, and for context, the capture 2.5 days later went perfectly for the OPA. With the capture happening at an ideal time of day, the OPA fleet went completely uncontested. However, this came at a high cost for little reward. 2 cruisers, 2 DDGs, and 5 brawlers were lost for only 2 kills and 3 combat kills. It's questionable if the losses were worth the effort. Finally, UN only lost 1 ship, an inexpensive brawler. While they did take several combat kills, those ships, regardless of their condition, did make it away. UN achieved its primary goal of taking the point and easily achieved its secondary goal of scoring kills with 3 Martian kills and 9 Belter kills. The UN comes out as the clear winner, with the OPA in second and MCR in third. Each nation employed different strategies to different levels of success. The UN kept it simple. They brought the best ships they could and as many as they could. When they could kill a target, they did, and otherwise, they kept on the capture point. The MCRN was even simpler. They just charged. This obviously didn't go very well. It could be said that they may have received more success with a hit-and-run style of attack, but it's hard to speculate. Finally, OPA strategy was confused. The Belter fleet had several weaker ships when more powerful ships were available to be fielded. Additionally, the JSO and FCN elements were probably too trigger-happy and could have just contributed to the fleet formation. If the fleet focused more on torpedo volleys and staying to formation, they could have inflicted more damage against the UN ships for lower losses. This battle was a lot of fun. It sucked to fight, as I was personally up to almost 5 a.m., and I cannot imagine what it felt like for our EU pilots who stayed up far into the morning. But the battle was interesting, and I think everyone who stuck around would say it was worth it. GG to all Martian, Belter, and Earther players who partook. Let's not do this again.